Hi, welcome back. I'm Jack Canfield, the host of Talking About Success, where we talk about success in your personal and your professional life. I have a wonderful guest today who is an expert in something called organizational change management. We're going to talk about that. So Sheila Cox is a pioneer in the field of organizational change management and a co-author of the recent book, The Technology Takers, Leading Change in the Digital Area. So I'm curious about the title of your book. Let's start with that. The Technology Takers. That's an interesting title. What does that mean exactly?
Well, Jack, you've probably heard the term price takers, which is an economic term, and it means that if you're a smaller company, you don't get to set the price for goods or services. The market makers set the price for goods or services. And so our analogy is that most companies cannot create their own technology. Or if they try to, they're really wasting a lot of time and energy and money that would be better spent simply adopting what's out there in the market and adapting their own behavior to take advantage of it.
Okay, cool. So most people have never heard the term organizational change management. You're an expert and a pioneer. Explain what that means.
Well, it's kind of funny you should say that, because when I told my mother, her first thought was that I worked in a laundromat handing out quarters. But actually, from an organizational standpoint, you're aware, I'm sure, that a lot of companies, in order to stay competitive, launch strategic initiatives. And if they're going to get the benefit from those strategic initiatives, their employees have to embrace it. Well, organizational change management is the practice of enabling those employees to embrace by becoming empowered, by becoming motivated, and by becoming mobilized so that they actually adopt that strategic initiative and that company gets the benefits that they intended.
So here you are, you're an acknowledged expert in the field. How did you become an acknowledged expert in the field?
Well, it's interesting because it's a relatively new field. I was working at KPMG Pete Morwick, which became Bearing Point, and I noticed a very disturbing trend. There were a lot of large companies who were implementing IT, that is information technology projects, that did not come in on time, on budget, or meet their objectives. In fact, 1 out of 5 actually was successful. And interestingly enough, in many cases, it had almost nothing to do with the actual technology. They spent all of their time and energy making sure that the technology from a hardware and a software standpoint worked. And then by the time they rolled it out to get their employees to use it, their employees were unaware, uninterested, and simply didn't want to use it. So it failed.
So I know you write about some of the misconceptions about change management or organizational change management.
Right.
What are those?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that all we have to do is train people and communicate to them. And you know as well as I that when you're trying to transform people's behaviors, transform their mindsets, this isn't about education and training. This is about getting them involved emotionally, mentally, and physically in what it is you want to do differently.
So if you were talking to a corporate executive, what advice would you give them?
Well, the biggest piece of advice is be very careful what you delegate, because you cannot delegate strategic leadership. And many executives have been taught, let's break it up into little pieces and let's delegate it. And you can do that with something tactical. But when you have a major organizational change and you need to determine how many people are going to be impacted and how much they're going to be impacted, then that's something that you have to have a role in as a leader.
Now, you've worked with a lot of big companies like Microsoft, Deutsche Bank, et cetera, and you've seen a lot of projects go awry.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit. What causes that?
Well, the main thing that causes that is that because they are so big and they are so expensive, a lot of time and energy is spent on the technology piece itself. It's usually headed up by the CIO. And they are so busy with so many things going on that the last thing they want to worry about is what they call the end users, the people who are actually going to make this system work. And so they put that off and put that off and put that off. And unfortunately, sometimes I get called in when it's been put off so long that now things have reached a breaking point.
It's too late.
Yeah.
So give us an example. I know you've worked with some
Sure.
successful projects as
Right.
well. Can you give us an example?
Well, Jack, one example would be some work I did with a UN agency. And as you know, with these organizational change challenges, the most important thing is to get the top executives involved at the very beginning. So in this example, we were implementing an enterprise resource program going across 30 different countries, many different languages. And we were successful because we got the top executives to come out and explain to everyone why it was important to do this and how their behavior would change. We videotaped everybody, and we had those tapes dubbed in more than one language. We distributed it to everybody in the organization. Now, you can imagine, Jack, there are a lot of other things that we did to make this successful. But the good news is that in the end, this project came in on time, on budget, and met its business objectives. And this became one of those 20% of projects that are actually successful.
You talk about the trifecta of results: on time, on budget, and actually
meeting the business objectives.
The objectives, yeah, very good, very good. Well, we live in an age of high technology where a lot of people are making constant mistakes and trying to get things to work. You can help them avoid that. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much, Jack. Really appreciate it.
All right, you know where to go now. All right, stick around. We'll be right back after this message.